is the 6:30 report, and this is Intan Hapsah Nugroho with the news. First, the headlines. Snipers pinned down Soviet troops in Azerbaijani capital of Baku as vast crowds mass on the streets. In Romania, students demand the resignation of lecturers and tutors appointed under the Ceausescu regime. Here at home, the coordinating minister for People's Welfare, Suparjo Rustam, opens a meeting between East Asia and Pacific countries. And we also take a look at the United States' effort to save the whooping crane from extinction. Now the news in detail. Nationalist snipers pinned down Soviet troops in the Azerbaijan capital Baku yesterday, as vast crowds massed on the street, defying a Moscow-imposed state of emergency. Thousands demonstrated in the capital and other cities, including Kabat, close to the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. 2 more nationalists killed in clashes with Soviet soldiers. In the capital Baku, the Salyansky garrison was the scene of some of the fiercest fighting when Soviet troops stormed into the capital early Saturday and broke through barricades erected by militants. Occasional shots rang out elsewhere in the Azerbaijani capital yesterday. The Soviet Interior Ministry reported 51 civilians and 6 soldiers dead and 287 civilians and 36 soldiers wounded in last Saturday's action, bringing the total number of casualties for the week to 129 dead and more than 500 wounded. The Republic's parliament was in emergency session to discuss the crackdown by troops who smashed through nationalist barricades early last Saturday morning. World chess champion Garry Kasparov said in Moscow yesterday that the situation in Azerbaijan was like a second Afghanistan. Kasparov was talking about Soviet troops who were sent into Azerbaijan to put down the Azerbaijani independence movement.
Use the fact of the national ethnic unrest between 2 nations, and they were doing nothing during the real event. For example, within the last 6 days. I'm not talking about previous 2 years. I think they could interfere effectively. But now they send the troops not to save the Armenians, because nobody can be saved now in Baku, but just to continue this national unrest, to have the maybe split between Russian and Azeris, and the most important reason, to show the strength for other nations in the Soviet Union. It's just to kill the pro-democratic movement in Azerbaijan, because the goal of those people is obvious. They want freedom, they want independence, and they want to stop the criminal superiority in the republic.
Some 10,000 East German Christians demonstrated in Nuremberg yesterday in a call for increased religious freedom in their country. Under the hardline communist regime of Erich Honecker in his capacity as president in December, religious worship was effectively outlawed. The demonstration came on the same day that the East German Communist Party conducted a purge of its members. Among those expelled was Egon Krenz, who took over from Honecker as president in November 1989 and was responsible for the opening of the Berlin Wall. After a marathon 14-hour emergency meeting, Communist leader Gregor Gysi said yesterday the party had not yet succeeded in making the transition from old-style Stalinist policies to democratic socialism. Gysi added that the communists must stand firm to ensure stability and free and fair elections due on May the 6th. Krenz was state party chief and chairman of the now defunct National Defense Council. The 52-year-old former security chief, who failed to persuade the country he had cracked from hardliner to reformer, now is not even a member of parliament, and his party card has been taken away from him. An estimated 6,000 students gathered outside a Bucharest language school yesterday, demanding the resignation of lecturers and tutors appointed under the Ceausescu regime. The demonstration came as Romania marked its first month of freedom after 40 years of communist repression. But the country's problems are far from over, as there is still unrest and distrust among the students. Romania's 23 million people still have a long way to go to create the true democratic and economic revival. The 145-man National Salvation Front, which took control after December 22nd overthrow, has taken a sometimes shaky grip on authority in Bucharest. European Community foreign ministers met in Dublin yesterday and backed calls for a 35-nation East-West summit to be held later this year.
European Security Summit for this year, community leaders responded to Mr. Gorbachev, who wants to use such a forum to fashion a new post-Cold War order, what he calls the Common European Home. Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd emerged to announce that the conference would address the very future of Europe. His message to fellow ministers that this was a period of instability.
I use the phrase that the exciting and heroic time when statues were smashed and dictatorships overthrown was past, or passing rapidly, and that the process of building institutions, free economies, is going to take a good deal longer and going to be difficult in many respects.
There was less agreement on the future of the two Germanys. Plans for East German membership of the EC were outlined by Commission President Jacques Delors amid anxieties about German reunification. He admitted there was opposition to his ideas.
My proposals were not unanimously welcomed, but I didn't ask for a vote on them. I simply use this meeting to reiterate my views, and I feel all the more strongly because I'm not German myself.
Before departing, ministers approved aid totaling £30 million for Romania, where food stocks were said to be down to 3 weeks.
The coordinating minister for People's Welfare, Suparjo Rustam, earlier today in Jakarta opened a meeting between East Asian and Pacific countries. The meeting precedes a world conference on education for all citizens. 150 delegations from 26 Asian Pacific countries, regional bodies, United Nations bodies, and non-government organizations are participating in the meeting, which is discussing ways to provide basic educational opportunities for all citizens in the Asia-Pacific region. Present at the meeting were the Minister of Culture and Education, Fuad Hassan, and representatives from UNDP, UNESCO, and the United Nations. The Minister of Home Affairs, Rudini, last night in Jakarta, opened an international seminar and workshop on the future of cities in Southeast Asia. The 5-day international seminar and workshop was organized by the Indonesian Architects Association in cooperation with the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture of Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. 100 participants are taking part in the seminar, which involves experts in the fields of architecture and city planning and scientists dealing in various aspects of city problems from Indonesia and other countries. During the seminar, participants will discuss the development of new cities and the rehabilitation of cities for the future. An industrial fair from India is scheduled to be held in Jakarta from the 26th of January to the 2nd of February. The same types of fairs are now taking place in Moscow and Amman. Preparation for the fair, which will feature 74 outstanding Indian companies, have been completed. According to the Chief Executive of the Fair Authority, K.V. Rajan, the selection of Indonesia as one of the sites of the fair is due to its strategic location and the extensive bilateral trade between the two countries. Bilateral trade between Indonesia and India during the first 8 months last year accounted for $96 million, an increase of 24% over the same period for the previous year. A chartered Boeing 727 aircraft with 61 passengers on board had to make an emergency belly landing at Atatürk Airport near Ankara, Turkey on Saturday, after its landing gear failed. The plane was on flight from the West German town of Hanover. As it approached Atatürk Airport, emergency services rushed to the runway and spread a heavy layer of foam to soften the landing. Despite the risk of fire on impact, passengers appeared unmoved by their ordeals as they disembarked. Konishiki, a Hawaiian sumo wrestler, won the Kyushu Basho Sumo Championship by beating Japanese opponent Chiyo Nufuji in Tokyo recently. Konishiki is the second foreigner ever to win the Kyushu Basho after Takamiyana, also a Hawaiian, in 1972.
Calendar this year. And for Konishiki, the largest wrestler in the history of the sport, the possibility of sumo immortality has arrived. If the Hawaiian overcomes the great Chiyo Nufuji, who's unbeaten this year, the way is clear for him to become only the second foreigner ever to win a basho. Konishiki wins by a force-out, much to the disappointment of the Japanese crowd. And with a final record 14 wins and 1 defeat, the 222-kilogram wrestler emulates the 1972 triumph of his Hawaiian compatriot, Takamiyama. For the 25-year-old champion, it's all a little too much.
John McEnroe's stormy career plummeted to new depths yesterday when he was sensationally thrown out of the Australian Open Championships for swearing at tournament officials. Here is the report.
Code violation, unsportsmanlike conduct, warning Mr. McEnroe. Code violation, racket abuse, point penalty, Mr. McEnroe. Code violation, verbal abuse, default, Mr. McEnroe. Game, set, match, point, please.
They went by the rule. I mean, they could have let me off. They could have said, you know, in the heat of the moment, it's not really what you're saying to the person. You're upset about the fact that they had just taken the point away for me to lose my serve. After you play for 3 hours and, you know, judging, it's not like everyone heard what I said. It was between me and 2 people. So I think that it was unnecessary to default me in that situation.
The whooping crane is a magnificent and delicate creature whose very survival is being threatened by the destruction of its natural habitat by land developers. Once there were thousands of cranes in the United States, now there are only a few dozen. To reverse this trend, a joint U.S.-Canadian captive breeding program in Maryland is bringing the whooping crane back from the edge of extinction.
The whooping crane is about 1.5 meters tall, snow white, with black-tipped wings and a brilliant dash of red on its head. Once thriving in the marshlands of North America, the whooping crane is now a critically endangered species. Farmlands and cities encroaching on the whooping crane's natural habitat make it nearly impossible for the species to survive. In 1941, the total population of these magnificent birds was at a record low. Only 22 were still alive. Today, the whooping crane is coming back from the edge of extinction. There are about 200 whoopers now, 54 in captivity here at the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, and the rest in the wild. Patuxent, near Washington, D.C., is the home of the joint U.S.-Canadian captive breeding program for whooping cranes. The two countries share the migration route of the last wild flock. Dr. George Archibald is co-founder of the International Crane Foundation, an organization known worldwide for its success in breeding captive endangered cranes. Dr. Archibald has been working to save cranes from extinction for over 25 years.
And the example set by the people of Canada and United States in helping the whooping crane is something that is now being emulated by the Russians and the Chinese and other countries in their effort to save endangered cranes.
The International Crane Foundation will start a second captive breeding program for whooping cranes with 22 birds from the Patuxent Research Center. According to the veterinarians at Patuxent, the whooper is very shy and easily agitated. This makes breeding whooping cranes in captivity very difficult. The female whooping crane normally lays 2 eggs, but generally only 1 chick survives. Wildlife scientists can take the second egg, hatch it in an incubator, and raise the chick by hand. But whooping crane caretakers do not want the birds to adjust to the presence of humans. Often, young cranes raised by humans, such as these sandhill cranes, will imprint on people. That is, the crane thinks it's a human being, not a crane. They can never be released into the wild. So researchers have often worn disguises while caring for cranes. Biologists discovered that if they place the whooping crane egg in a sandhill crane's nest, the sandhill will rear the whooper chick, and the chick will not imprint on a person. Dr. Archibald calls the crane an ambassador of goodwill. The bird's migration routes cross so many international boundaries, efforts to save the crane bring nations together.
I find many kindred spirits all over the world, and I have found that one person with the proper motivation and knowledge and character can really move mountains.
That's the news for tonight. Coming up next, Sefti Sofian reports on fishing in East Nusa Tenggara. And from me, it's good night.